Let's get some context and perspective now on executions in America. We're joined by a veteran reporter of the Associated Press who's observed more than 400 executions in America, in Texas. Michael Graczyk has been with the AP for more than 46 years and continues to do some freelance reporting for the news service. Welcome, Mr. Graczyk. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate the interest.
Why don't we start here? You have the distinction of likely witnessing more executions than any other person in the U.S. since the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty back in 1976. How did this begin for you, covering executions so regularly?
I was transferred from Detroit to Texas, to Houston in 1983, which was a year after Texas resumed carrying out capital punishment. So I wasn't here for the very first one, but I have been here for every one since. Part of my duties was, among other things, was covering the Texas prison system, and part of that was covering executions. And by state rules, the AP had a guaranteed spot in the Texas death chamber to be a media witness, one of 5 media witnesses allowed in the chamber. And it just sort of evolved from there, where Texas kept carrying out executions, and I kept covering the story, and the numbers kept mounting.
Well, here in Utah, it's very rare that a person is executed, and so the execution this week is really dominating the headlines here. What's it like in Texas, though, where executions have been far more frequent? I mean, is there an appetite for coverage? It seems like Texas has a certain reputation, fair or unfair, for having many executions. I don't know what the stats are on that, but what's it like there where they're more frequent than they are here?
On the media side, it barely raises a blip on the radar. For instance, the case that is happening soon is a Houston case, so it'll attract some attention in Houston, but beyond that, probably not. It's my belief that because of the number of executions that have taken place in Texas, it has evolved into a local story as opposed to a broader statewide or even a national story, although we do cover it nationally. So it's of interest to the area generally where the crime occurred or where the victim lived or where perhaps the trial occurred. But beyond that, it may get a mention on the news or a paragraph in the newspaper, but that's about it.
Well, how do you begin to prepare to cover an execution there?
I actually began covering it at the time of the crime and the trial. When we decide that, when we hear that it's death penalty eligible, you start kind of building a file. And in some cases, I've covered trials that resulted in death sentences. And if it's in other areas of the state, you just kind of keep an eye on the case and keep building that file. You follow the appeals as they wind their way through the courts. Eventually, this inmate will get an execution date, and then the coverage for me becomes a little more intensive because you just want to keep tabs on what's going on, and that's kind of how I do it.
You know, these cases can be so complex. There are so many components here, right? And over the years, you've talked to victims' families, you've talked to the condemned, their families. Are there any common threads from case to case that you can share, or are they just so different?
Well, they're very different, but there is kind of some common denominators in there. For one, I think many of the victim families believe the whole process takes far too long. And by the time it's carried out, it has kind of faded. And I hope I never have to endure the loss of a loved one to a murder, and I hope no one ever does. But when a case takes 25 or 30 years to come to a conclusion, some of the, I guess, drama of it fades away. On the other hand, inmates that I've interviewed, there are few and far between ones who will actually acknowledge committing the crime. And I've always found it a little interesting that despite the notoriety that Texas has as an aggressive death penalty state, I have yet to meet an inmate who, when asked about the crime and who admits to the crime, will I'll say, well, didn't you know that we had the death penalty in Texas? And to a person, I have yet to find one who says, yeah, I knew there was a death penalty in Texas, but I did it anyway. So even though there's this perception of Texas as being very, very active as a death penalty case, for those who wind up on death row, clearly it didn't register.
Can you take us to the witness room as you're witnessing the execution and paint the picture for us what it's like for you to be in there?
It's a very small room. Actually, it's changed over the years. When they first started doing executions, it was the room where witnesses are was one large room, and you were a few feet away from the inmate. Actually, if you wanted to, you could probably reach out and touch that person. You were separated from the inmate by just a metal or steel rail. In the 1990s, a law was passed that allowed relatives or friends of the victim in the case to also witness executions. So they divided this larger room into two smaller rooms. So now, in Texas at least, there are two rectangular small rooms. If you stood in it in the center and you extended your arms, you could probably touch the walls on each side. Unlike some Hollywood versions or adaptations, at least in Texas, there are no chairs, no seats. You stand, you walk up to a wall that is made of plexiglass. There are two sheets of plexiglass with jail bars in between them, and you watch. The inmate is maybe 4 or 5 feet away from you, and he speaks into a microphone that is dangling over his head, and you listen over speakers. And assuming or depending upon the number of folks who are in there, reporters are the last ones to enter into this room, the witness room. So sometimes you have to try to look over shoulders or between heads. And after all, as a reporter, you're there to do your job, and you need to see and need to hear. So that's sometimes the biggest challenge.
Okay, you just mentioned you're a reporter. You're there to do your job. I'm sure people have asked you, why on earth would you want to witness something like this? Can you talk about the role of a journalist in this situation in witnessing this application of a sentence?
Well, I think it's important to have someone in there who does not have a personal stake in the outcome. Clearly, there is no authority or power that the government has that is the power to take your life or my life. And if they're going to do this, then I think it's important that someone who is, perhaps divorced from the whatever elements of the case that there are, to be there and to either watch and then report and decide, A, that this is being done properly, and B, there were no glitches, and if there were, then I can come out and I can include in the story that they mishandled this, or this was different, or this did not look correct. And then, of course, you ask the prison officials why this or that or another thing happened. But I just think it's important that someone who is independent be in there to watch this process, because it is important and it is significant. The state's taking someone's life.
Yeah, the ultimate punishment. Michael Graczyk, a veteran reporter with the Associated Press in Texas, thank you for your time, and thank you very much for your perspective. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in Texas today,